Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha, and I'm just sitting here in my robe drinking my morning coffee looking sexy as hell as usual. And for those of you who say I don't look sexy as hell when I do these videos in my robe, nobody cares what you think. I didn't ask you shit. Alright, today I want to talk to everyone about what I personally prescribe for people who I'm working with over the years who seem to be having issues with their chest lagging. Now, most of you know that I consider the barbell bench press and the barbell overhead press to be enough, particularly when things like closed grip bench press are added in, for most people to develop a pretty well balanced chest, at least for their first couple of years of development. Now, for those of you who are on my novice program, you're going to ask, oh, should I take this advice in your novice program? No, because if you're on my novice program, you don't have weak body parts. Everything between your calves and your traps is a weak body part. Your whole body is weak. You don't need specialized training. So let me get that out of the way up front. All right, so the lift that I feel is the best lift for people with a lagging chest who are bench pressing correctly and overhead pressing correctly is the dumbbell bench press. The reason for that is because this lift has the unique ability to put the largest stretch reflex on the chest, which is something that isn't always being activated correctly, because I have most people, when I have them bench press, I have them pause benching, so they're not getting a stretch reflex. They're getting a good amount of chest development from the pause at the bottom, but they're not getting a stretch reflex, and I would rather not have them go to touch and go, because touch and go will reduce bench strength. And for many, even though they're getting a stretch reflex, they're going to get less chest development out of it. So my go-to is always going to be the incline dumbbell press, and it also will help particularly bring up the upper chest a little more, which for many people is what gives the illusion of a lagging chest. But here's the caveats with it. I see a lot of mistakes on it. First of all, one of the biggest safety mistakes I see is that people will have the dumbbells all the way out at 90 degrees. So that they're almost holding like a barbell. And when you do that, you have an excessive amount of elbow flare, and it puts stress on the rotator cuffs that don't need to be there. So for most people, I'm going to recommend that you pronate the wrist down, and you'll notice that changes the whole bar path, and it keeps your elbows tucked. Some people can even go to all the way down like this, straight up and down with a full hammer grip, and do this with them. So that grip change is the first thing that I recommend that people do. Now, the other big mistake I see people do is that they do partial reps at the top. They don't go all the way down. So you'll see people who are just focusing on the lockout, and it looks like this. You'll see them doing this. If you notice, I'm not even going all the way down on that. So if you're not going all the way down on the lift, you're missing the whole stretch reflex that you get out of it in the chest, and you're turning it primarily into just a delt and tricep exercise. Instead, what I recommend is that people work the bottom 2/3. You need to get your scapula pinched together as tight as you can and keep them there from the time you set up till the time you finish the set. And you only go as high as you can without your scapula pulling apart. If your scapula pull apart when you lock out, then don't lock out. But you need to be focusing on the bottom of the movement. So instead, it will look something like this. And you're getting that stretch reflex at the bottom. And you can skip the lockout if you have to, depending upon what your scapula actually do. Because remember, you're trying to use this primarily as a pressing movement for the chest, not a pressing movement primarily for the triceps. So skipping the lockout isn't that big of a deal if it lets you keep more tension on the chest personally. The other big mistake is that people go on too steep of an incline. They start hitting 45 degrees, which is right here, or higher. When you do that, you take some of the stress off the pecs and you put more onto the interior deltoids. What I recommend is 30 degrees or less. Even if you go down to a 10 or a 15 degree, which is very shallow, you're still doing an incline. It's still putting a lot of stress on the chest. So somewhere between 10 and 30 degrees, usually about 30 degrees, which is less than a 45, is what I recommend for most people on this, and that will give you the most tension on the chest on the lift. So those are the 3 rules I recommend for this lift. Is 1, keeping 45 degrees on the wrist, so keep the wrist pronated, don't come all the way out so that you're not flaring the elbows. Focus on the bottom of the movement with the scapula fully retracted so that you can focus that stretch reflex at the bottom, which is what's going to give you the chest development out of this lift. And 3, keeping the incline angle shallow enough that it remains primarily a pec movement instead of an anterior deltoid movement. I would consider doing it as often as 3 times a week if your chest is truly lagging. I don't care what sets and reps you do, that shit's almost irrelevant. People spend too much time focusing on that bullshit. Like it's that important. You probably need to be periodizing your rep ranges and your sets and your volume anyways instead of doing the same shit every week. But I would consider doing it 3 times a week at whatever your normal program calls for in terms of sets and reps for your accessory movements. And do not replace the bench press with it. When you do weak point training for a muscle, when you have a lagging body part, you don't drop your big primary movers, you add accessory movements in. So if you're already benching 2 or 3 times a week, you keep benching 2 or 3 times a week and you add this as an accessory after the fact. And that's what I prescribe for people with a lagging chest. Alright guys, that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it has been informative and I will talk to you next time.